Good morning, everyone. We are starting the session. I welcome you all to this ASSOCHAM CFO Roundtable. I request Dr. Lavneesh Chanana, the chairman of our IT and ITS Council, to kindly make his welcome address. Over to you, Dr. Chanana.
And once again to this webinar on managing cash flows with technology. And you'll see in the agenda, this is a multi-stakeholder event that we have put together. We have chairman of IT Council, chairman of FinTech Council, and chairman of Banking Council. All three councils coming together to address this very important topic of managing cash flows, particularly during the pandemic times. If we see, what I want to do is just to set the context for the next 5 minutes or so, and trigger some of the thought process as we have a eminent panel to discuss various aspects of the management of cash flows. We have people from the domain. We have people from the technology sector, and others with the huge expertise in this area, and they'll be definitely able to add value to this. Now, if you see the impact of COVID per se, broadly, if we categorize, there are three broad areas that we see which is happening on the organization. So one obviously is the whole disruption in the supply chain perspective. Second is the whole impact on employee perspective. So the remote management, the work from home, etc., etc. And third, which is an area of the today's topic, that's the finance perspective, and particularly in finance, it's how do I manage cash flows, how do I manage funding, how am I going to achieve the goals of my margins if I have to rework those margins. So if I see at a CFO level the kind of questions that typically would a CFO would be addressing is, do I have enough cash to sustain fixed costs? That's something that given do I have the what is the impact of government restrictions on exports and the geopolitical scenario that we are going through on exports, imports, logistics, and therefore as a downstream impact on my cash. Do I have assistance from the government in any manner? We also see a change in the costing models for labors, machine capacity, the raw material prices, etc. Given the dynamic nature of all these variables, all these changes, how do I ensure, in terms of managing that things are in order? How do I keep adequate short-term funding from my banking partners? Can I find innovative ways to cut cost and capital expenditure? So some of these are questions that every CFO, every head of finance, and every other stakeholder who is involved in finance is trying to address, given the dynamic nature of changes. Now, at this point, I would also like to highlight very important role of technology. Now, when I say technology, it's the information technologies, the fintech, and also the domain expertise, all three coming together in terms of evolving solutions and giving me, as an example, do I need to have real-time insights? Can I simulate what will I need and how much will I need and where will I get it from? Can I actually have a performance dashboard to identify where exactly and how do I serve my end customers well through in using technology, and then hence getting the benefit of lower cost of distribution and rendering of services. So some of these questions actually are becoming pertinent, and I think what it is leading to is not only a response to the situation of COVID. It is also leading to a reorientation of culture, a reorientation of financial management as a discipline, reorientation of the way we'll manage cash flows going forward. Because some of this would become frozen and some of this would become would get imbibed in the very culture and the process that we take forward. So that's the context that I wanted to trigger this discussion on, and we have very good speakers lined up to talk to each one of you and share their expertise. I hope it will be a great insight for all of us to listen to such experts. And thank you, Dr. Pandey, for agreeing to moderate the discussion so fantastically well in terms of very thought provoking and very meaningful questions. I hand over now to the chairman of the FinTech Council, Mr. Ashutosh Chadda, and look forward to a very interesting deliberation during the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Chandan. That was a good context setting. Am I audible?
Yes.
Perfect. So you actually set the context very, very, very well, right? And let me sort of try and step back a little bit. If you're looking at how do we leverage technology for cash flow management, right? I would rather step away at this point of time and say, is it really just cash flow management that we're talking about, or are we talking about really both from a CFO and a business owner perspective, the concept of efficiency and effectiveness of governance of our businesses, right? Which will help rebuild and help me expand my business in the current scenario, especially with the impact of COVID, right? And my submission is that effective operations will actually all contribute to what we call effective cash flow management, right? So let's look at a standard scenario for any business, right? It could be a small business, could be a large business, right? Typically, what happens is you have customers who owe you money. Many times you don't know when that money is going to come in, right? At the same time, you have your vendors, you have your contractors who are obviously requesting for their invoices to be accepted and to be paid up for, right? And especially in the small and medium business size, this is a very common cash flow conundrum. And if you really look at it, being able to pay bills on time is an important reputational issue also, because vendors do talk to each other, customers do talk to each other, and that also goes to building a lot of your a company's position in the market, right? Financial uncertainties, if you really look at it, often arise when business owners don't have a clear picture of their financial ledgers. They don't know when funds are expected. They would not know possibly when cash is tied up in inventory, when is it moving, etc. And all of those and when and how can they plan for unanticipated costs? And COVID actually has brought that up very, very starkly right now, right? And that's where, as Lavnish was saying, technology can actually support to a large extent. So what are the type of solutions which are currently being used? There is better ledger management, knowing what's owned and what's due to you at all times. There are cash flow management tools which are available. There is this entire concept of expense monitoring. Lavnish talked about, managing your capital expenses, managing your day-to-day expenses so that it contributes to cash flow management. There's the concept of going digital and online payment platforms so that account-to-account transfers happen instantaneously, so that money comes into your account pretty fast, right? And you don't need to actually do the traditional concept of going and collecting checks from people, right? As well as there are systems to help inventory tracking. Meticulously managing your invoices, your collections and expenses can help even out cash flow. And there are studies which, and I think so it's a no-brainer, which say that if done well, this will add to your bottom line, right? Because you don't pay people in advance of the time when you get the money, and hence you don't have to fund those cash flow situations. But at the same time, there are other factors which can derail your entire concept of cash flow management, right? These are the standard factors that we all know of, but there are other factors. And one of the key things that we see, especially in COVID, and Lavnish did touch upon that, was supply chain, right? The ability for companies to plug into global supply chains the ability for them to have working capital to kickstart their business, right, is going to be critical. And today, what has got accentuated because of COVID, right, is I think the three or four key things. One, businesses have closed, revenue streams are uncertain, right? But at the same time, the businesses, especially the small businesses, have to cater to only their own small catchment area. So because of that, they are hindered for growth, and they don't know where else can they get funds from, or they can get revenue from, right? Salaries, rent, supply chains still need to be maintained. Inventory still needs to be maintained, whatever inventory they have. And hence, when you look at these three or four things, you're looking at situation which gets further accentuated, which gets further problematic, and especially for the small traders who have had to close shop for maybe 3 to 4 to 5 months or more than that. So what are the problems? So what are those problems that we look at? We look at working capital requirement. We look at sustained credit. We also look at a new problem now, which is the ability to trade beyond or trade or engage in commerce beyond the catchment area that you were doing it. Maybe for large companies, it's not such a big problem. But for the smaller, mid-sized companies, it is a problem. So can I go beyond the border of my neighborhood, borders of my district, borders of my state, and maybe borders of my country, where I can maybe sell my goods and also get revenue, right? And obviously, in this entire process, digital commerce becomes a very important thing. So how can technology address some of these issues? And I'm sure, in the future deliberations with the panels, these points will come in. But I'll just put a couple of points very quickly. You can look at microcredit, especially for the small organizations. Can we create a new credit ecosystem, right? Where you connect small retailers, for example, to FMCGs and financial institutions using artificial intelligence and other data analytics platforms, right? Financial institutions can actually look at how small organizations, small traders who are taking goods from FMCGs on a daily or a weekly basis, how do they pay back? And based on that, they can actually give them credit. So that gives them ongoing credit or even working capital credit, which is so much important. Then you can look at additional ways of financing, vendor financing. There's concepts called vendor finance, supply chain financing, which has vendor financing. You have dealer financing. You have online sales financing. That takes care of your working capital and sustainability in concepts. Then, if you look at aspects of going online, if organizations start going online, it can actually help them increase their market access. So you can go beyond trading in the catchment area that you were looking at. You can look for suppliers beyond your own trading area. You can also look at customers beyond your own trading area or your own area that you were earlier working towards. So that becomes another solution. And then you start figuring out that by ensuring working capital access, by ensuring sustainable credit, and by increasing your catchment area, you're actually you're not just making yourself self-reliant and atmanirbhar, but you're also growing your business. So, and this will all come back to the fundamental issue of contributing to your cash flow regularity. So there is technology to help you maintain what you're doing right now, but you can also leverage technology to help grow your business, help sustain your business, and get additional capital. And I'm sure the deliberations after this will take care of these things. I'll just now pass it back to Varun for taking it forward.
Thank you, Dr. Chadha. Can I request Akhil Chaudhary ji to make his address? Akhil ji, I'm just making you the presenter. You can share your screen.
Thank you, Varun.
Can you please check?
Yeah.
There's an option of screen sharing.
Yeah, I am on screen share only. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, it's showing. Starting to share. Yes, I can see.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks. I think thanks, SHM, for giving me an opportunity to share in the company of this August panel. I think it's a very, very apt subject, and more so in the current times. Of course, cash flow is the lifeblood, or we can say the heart of any business. Now, the biggest challenge that we see is across the organizations is a lot of times, whether it's owners, a lot of times even the key leaders, and sometimes even the finance and accounts person, they do not give as much attention to cash flows. While P&L, EBITDA, kind of net operating profit is looked at, but cash flow is not given the kind of significance that it deserves. How many times have you heard of organizations who say that I need to automate my cash flows? All of us talk about automating ERP, automating kind of my operations, automating my contact center, customer support, but very few times that we talk of automating cash flows. We are in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Of course, even a person who is revered like Warren Buffett, he couldn't foresee the S&P 200 index for Q2 has been down by minus 33%. That's been a watershed in the history. Now, obviously, as organizations, we are faced with suddenly a large project is lost. What do we do? What if our payments are delayed? What if I have 50 new people joining in the organization? What if I lose 3 customers? Or what do? I get suddenly 2 large deals. See, the associated cash flow management and risk, it's kind of a huge problem. And obviously, we are, all of us are kind of intrigued by mobility, cloud, big data, machine learning, etc., etc. Now, obviously, all these factors we bring together, and I think it can help us break that myth that cash flow can really be a transparent and visible process. Now, of course, one of the big challenges is people say it is the right cup of tea for large organizations or enterprises. But I think as the SHM chairman pointed out, that small and medium organizations do need it as much. In fact, rather, they would need it a lot more than larger organizations because of the so-called cash reserves that they might have. I think I'm talking of in very, very simple manner, some simple bullet points. What do we really need to do? I would say each organization has to adopt a mission of working towards an automated approach to cash flow forecasting. And I say it is so critical because I'm extremely passionate about entrepreneurship. And I think it's also a known fact that about 90% of the startups, they fail. And incidentally, the data suggests that 82% of them fail because of cash flows. And so is the reason, the biggest reason for a lot of established players failing to continue or sustain their business journey. So I think the very first step I would say is go paperless, go digital. Start with e-invoicing, online payments, both payments as well as receipts. Simple steps. automate the processes leading to billing and invoicing. Of course, just automating invoicing doesn't help. There are series of steps that lead to billing and invoicing. Of course, one of the key tools or technologies that can get used over here is RPA, or what we call as robotic process automation. So, to continue on that journey, make it very, very easy for customers to pay you. I think our panel already talked about various payment options, different bank apps, and so on. But then there are some very interesting pay later options that are coming up. A lot of lending options that are getting created in the marketplace, and it would be really worthwhile to kind of evaluate them and choose the one that's best suited to your needs. So automating the payables is absolutely critical. A lot of times people think cash flow is done a great job. We have done a great job by getting inflows early from our customers. But it's as critical to pay your suppliers on time. And that way, not only you build credibility, you rather keep getting great service and better prices. Of course, integrating the data from disparate systems. We typically call it as our ERP, yet I think a lot of our data comes from banks, payment aggregators, it comes from different vendors, and it's always critical to bring all of them into a consistent data warehouse. And obviously, the subject that I was talking about, cash flow planning, forecasting, and one of the tools that is going to help you in a big way is BI and analytics. So I think this is where we've broadly summarized the process. I'll not talk about it. I think has been already been talked about. Just a summary in terms of gathering input data, interpreting, prepare an integrated cash flow forecast. But I think the key factor over here is being able to flag the risks as well as opportunities. Now, the what if scenarios in cash flow forecasting, they just do not make you aware of the risk. A lot of times they throw up opportunities. What if I see an opportunity, I have ample cash flows to be able to stock enough raw materials and be able to service the market faster and outwit the competition. And of course, the biggest insight that it can offer is that management can provide timely attention to anomalies and consequently work towards optimization of the cash flows. Now, I think so. What we really need to look at is our invoice to cash cycles or order to cash cycles, as you deem fit from your organizational or operations point of view. Or, of course, the other key cycle to be looked at is P2P, that we refer as procure to pay. Now, again, there are a lot of technology options available over here. And the key thing is assimilate, integrate all the options put together to have a customized or a ready-made robust solutions. In fact, when we talk of SMEs, there are a lot of SMEs who can look forward to small and medium-sized cloud-based solutions which are best suited to their needs. Now, another factor in cash flow kind of improvement using technology is alternate data-based prompt lending options. The banks, financial institutions, and a lot of payment kind of payment innovations that are taking place. they provide us financing options based on alternate data. A lot of times we think that relying on debt will only increase our costs and consequently impair our cash flows. Whereas the reality is, a lot of times it even opens up opportunities for you to do generate bigger revenue or create kind of great procurement deals from your vendors because you are able to help them get immediate cash flows. So I think, just to summarize, I think the fundamentals that we need to really remember is the data from the disparate data sources needs to be harmonized into a consistent or standard data. The governance is absolutely critical. Reviewing and monitoring on an ongoing basis, and discipline in that governance process is, I think I need not talk about it. I think all of you understand it very well. And thereby, what we really need to have is a shift to a cash-oriented mindset. It's not just finance. A lot of times we just think that finance is everything, like I think our esteemed panelists said earlier. We need to have a cash-oriented mindset, whether it's procurement, whether it is our inventory or stock keeping team, or it's kind of our incentives or HR practices, where people are rewarded based on how they help in getting the cash flows right. So I think I would just like to end over here. I would just like to say cash flow is a journey, and we all can get suitably or greatly rewarded in our organizations for contributing to that journey in a strong manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Akhilji. Can I request Atul Kumar Gupta ji, President ICAI, to kindly make his keynote address?
Thank you, Varunji. Very respected all the colleagues, and specifically the S.C. Agarwal Saab, our colleagues from the different committees of the association, Dr. Lavneesh ji, Ashutosh ji, Akhil Chaudhary ji, Rohit ji, and Naveen ji, and Charan Singh ji, and the session Dr. Alok Pandey ji. At the outset, I'm thankful to the SHM for holding this very important meeting at the appropriate time and giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I will for that different that how this topic which is being there, that is managing cash flows with the technology, that it is very important and rightly set the tone by the my the other speakers, colleagues who spoke before me, that it is very important, and even Ashutosh ji rightly mentioned that rather than we should be speaking about the cash, we should speak about the overall ecosystem. Here, I just wish to draw the attention of our colleagues here that when we are talking about the managing the cash and specifically the technology, it is the right time, as we can see that because of the COVID situation, everybody try to innovate in one or the other way, and it is the high time when our even MSMEs and even other organization has to see how they will be able to manage the continuous cash by adopting and specifically the technology. I believe I am audible to everybody. I'm audible.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I was mentioning that even I was with a kind of a concept. So I just give you an example which will be very useful for the participants and the attendees here. That I come across within a very unique case, that when we are all aware about the EMIs. So that is called equated monthly installments, wherein we are going for a housing loan or a some kind of other mortgage and other things. But I come across with a concept called EDI. So that is the equated daily installments. You are aware that when we are talking about the auto loan and everything, we are all taking the auto loans based on our annual returns and the capacity to pay. But when we are talking about the lower strata of the society, in case some auto rickshaw driver is looking for buying a four-wheeler and getting attached with the one or the other aggregator. So there are the cases when they don't have the income tax returns and the other details available, even capacity to pay on a monthly basis. So a company, I come across with a kind of a situation, a unique idea that the company launched a product which is like a recharge card, which can be placed on the vehicle or engine of the vehicle. And once you will recharge the card, the engine will start, otherwise the engine will not start. So in a way that it is a unique way when the company installed that particular, initiated that particular in one of the global jurisdiction. And I can tell you that this create a large amount of participation by the various borrowers into that particular scheme to enter into the not only to increase their social status, but also having managing the cash flow. So what I'm trying to convey you that in the kind of in this COVID situation, it's very important that not only we innovate the different way to manage our cash flows, but also how to use the technology to innovate the new way of doing business is also very important, which will maintain and which will ensure the new way of cash flow into the system as well. I just wish to draw the attention of my colleagues here that even ICAI has tried to develop some kind of a mechanism to support the MSME into this particular domain. And we issued a very important document. I just wish to show you on the screen. That is the MSME rebooting the MSME and this business continuity checklist. And if you will go through this is available on the website of the ICAI. We talked about how the working capital requirements will be managed by the MSMEs operating cycles, how to improve the liquidity situation and the various schemes of the government, and apart from the other initiatives. So all these things can be there. We need to guide the industry, we need to guide the MSME that how in this important time, how they will be able to manage their cash flows in a better way, how they maintain their liquidity. And so we create a kind of a questionnaire. And if somebody will go through with that questionnaire and will answer, automatically the situation can be improved by using these kind of a management principles which are being given in this particular booklet. At the same time, there was a Varunji views was that I should speak about the profession as well, that how the profession is gearing up into the domain of technology, how the financial professionals are adopting the fintech, and how the ICAI is supporting their professionals into this fintech. I just wish to share with you there are a number of initiatives taken by the ICAI to see, because our professionals are playing a very, very important role, not only as a partner in nation building, but also to supporting the industry in all the way, whether it is so I used to say that the chartered accountants are gradually becoming from ASP to BSP, that is the assurance service provider to a business solution provider. So it is also very important that we move with the technology. We are aware about the digital disruption, and that's why I just wish to share with you the 5 important initiatives taken by the ICAI. The first one is that we are doing a lot of study on the various impact of technology on the repetitive and the routine functions made with the artificial intelligence, because normally in the school time we were reading the ABCD stands for A for apple and B for ball, but today the A stands for artificial intelligence, B stands for blockchain. And since all these technologies including the robots are practically automating the routine and repetitive functions which are the low skill functions, so we need to see that our colleagues are getting mastered in the not only into this AB but also in the C and D, that is cybersecurity and data analytics. So what we have started that we initiated a research paper with the Institute of England and Wales, and on the 16th of September we are launching that document, which will be showcasing that how the industry is adopting this artificial intelligence, blockchain and the robots, and what are the how they can adopt more and more this technology to automate the things, to see that the omissions and the routine errors can be avoided, and automation can be achieved, which will increase their productivity. At the same time, when we are launching this report, I am aware that there will be a kind of a requirement that the members need to develop the expertise on the C and D. And that's why the ICAI started a new concept called L1 to L5, which means that from the articleship level, we are looking for a data analytics training to our students. And then we are, apart from the launching the various programs, we have recently entered an MOU with the Gujarat Forensic University to guide our members to obtain the diploma and something like that expertise being developed on this data analytics aspect landscape. And last but not the least, we have also started a concept of a virtual office. Even we organized a webinar wherein our one of our colleague is running his entire office through a RV. Van. So RV, just to share with you that he's running this complete office from the RV, having the more than 100 members team, but it's completely automation process which is being achieved. So what we are doing, that large number of certificate programs we have started. We have aware that how the technology is going to impact the accounting profession and how we have to provide. Even I just wish to share with you that we have launched the forensic labs, the data analytics labs as well in our profession, wherein we are giving the hands-on training to our members on these aspects. You are aware that 2 days before we initially launched the concept paper on the forensic accounting and investigation standards as well. Is been largely covered by the media, and by the end of December 2020, I believe that the first set of forensic standards for the investigation and accounting will be available, and India will be becoming a pioneer in this particular domain. So these are the few initiatives taken by the ICI in the fintech area. But again, I will re-emphasize on the one aspect that in this era of technology, to have this cash flow, managing the cash flow, I believe that the companies need to innovate that how they can provide their services, how they can supply their goods in such a innovative way that they ensure the proper cash flow flowing into their business cycle. ICI also, just to share with you that into this particular aspect, into looking into this aspect that how our members can become a business solution provider, is going to launch the two important initiative in the month of October. That is, one is the mentorship program, wherein we will be adopting more than 1 lakh MSME units by our professionals on a pro bono basis, and they will be doing a mentoring for them to make them a real net exporters in the times to come. And also, we are trying to start the facilitation centers for the MSMEs on the various compliances and this financial management issue in all the district of the country. So we will start with our branches where we are available in the 165 branches in the country. But gradually, with the support of the honorable, we will see that the support from the ministry is available to us, and we will be launching the facilitation center in all the 700 plus district of the country. So this is all from my side, and best wishes to the entire panel that for a very fruitful discussion and a very useful discussion at the appropriate time. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Gupta ji, for this address. And I now request Rohit ji to kindly make his industry address.
Thank you. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, ji.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Atulji. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today at the ASSOCHAM CFO Roundtable to share my perspective on the topic, managing cash flow with technology. There is no question that in these COVID-19 times, we have all experienced an unprecedented level of volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. Front of mind for CFOs and their teams is the need to navigate through this uncertainty and minimize the impact of the crisis, maintain business continuity, manage liquidity, and safeguard not just critical customer services, but also safeguard our own employees and their jobs. Then we need to carefully steer our way to recovery so that we can emerge from these uncertain times even stronger than before. It is very important for the CFO community to navigate through this crisis where we have risks and uncertainty. While the risk can be managed, uncertainty is an unknown that we have to deal with in our respective business. There is an opportunity in every crisis, and hence it is very important for senior finance leaders to go back to the strategic plan or strategic vision and ensure that the organization continues making long-term investments in strategic growth areas or opportunities. At the beginning of the crisis, I heard multiple times CFOs saying, cash is king. After 5 months, the current view is cash is God. In good times, organization focuses a lot on P&L management. Now there is a razor-sharp focus on balance sheet management in addition to P&L management. Preserving cash was senior finance leaders' top business concern through April at the beginning of the crisis. But now, CFOs are prioritizing different concern. Most are focusing on protecting their assets and cash flows, giving themselves the breathing room to shift from addressing immediate problems to positioning their companies for the rest of 2020. At the beginning of COVID crisis, the focus was on business continuity. We heard the term keeping the lights on. So the focus was on crisis response, employee safety, secure remote working, and so on and so forth. The crisis has now moved from COVID crisis to economic crisis, wherein there is focus on crash preservation, access to funding, forecasting and assessing real business demand, both from a short-term and a long-term perspective, and supply chain risk mitigation crisis. Companies are also focusing on contingency planning, cash flow projection and management, and cost optimization. Companies are pondering on how to change their company's cost structure in response to COVID crisis. If you look at any business, there is a non-discretionary spend and a discretionary spend. So companies are looking at what cost to preserve, what cost to remove, and what cost to reintroduce and when. The approach taken by most of the companies is survive, revive, thrive, and sustain. The business impact of uncertain times for CFOs requires a coherent response to succeed in the environment. The focus is on liquidity and cash management, working capital management, financial close management, dynamic planning, and most importantly, risk management. Today, technology plays a very important role in all of this. Digitization can help companies get a real-time view of cash, cash flow projections, and a clear insight into working capital requirement for the immediate and near-term future. Second most important thing is a single source of truth. No more systems hopping from one system to another system. You will have unified view in terms of access for all relevant data on a central platform. Most importantly, deeper drill down against many levels of granularity so as to really look at what is the non-discretionary spend, what is the discretionary spend, why are we spending what we are spending, and do we really need to spend it for the financial viability standpoint. We need to survive, but we need to also prepare for a bounce back. And hence, the focus has to be both on short term, medium term, and long term. While cost and spend management and cash flow optimization will be very critical in the short and medium term during widespread disruption of economic activity, demand contraction, and dislocation of supply chains, businesses need to be able to effectively adapt to business rebounds, capture the demand, and be successful. At the end, I would say that the need of the hour is to navigate the current troubled times with something called as nimblicity, which stands for nimble and simplicity. I would now like to hand it over to Naveen Gupta ji for his address. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohit. And firstly, I would like to thank SHM for really arranging this topic and the discussion at such a crucial time. And thank to all the audience for coming in such a large number to really look upon the criticality of, as Rohit rightly pointed out, cash has really changed its face from king to god within the period of 4 months only. And that's exactly when I was also talking to some of the CFOs. They were talking earlier that Naveed, we have created 750 crores worth of line of credit and we are comfortable fine. But now if you look on them, and again, as Rohit has rightly said, keeping the light on. Your essential activities of manufacturing, construction did start immediately after 30 days of the COVID also. But what happens to cash? What happens to your back office, CFO back office operation, where they are need to support them all the relevant cash as well as getting the inflow of your cash from the customers as well. As Dr. Charna started the session by saying the insight, dashboarding, and system doing the recommendation, also with a lot of culture and the change management which is required, also emphasized by Dr. Chaudhary, Mr. Chaudhary as well as Rohit. And Mr. Chadha talked about operational efficiency, although it is required for all point of a time. At this point of a time, certainly operational efficiency of a different level is required. And as Mr. Chaudhary brought about very rightly, we talk about top line, we talk about revenue growth, we talk about 30% growth CAGR year on year, we talk about growth in bottom line, EBITDA improvement. But how many times we are really changed focus and changing our KPIs and making KPIs of DSO important for the incentivization for operational team, right? How many times we are saying that, okay, if you get an early payment, not only customer will get an early payment discount, but also the teams who is making that money into the system will get some more incentive. how many times we are talking about supplier satisfaction for making an early payment and also capitalizing on the early payment discount. And if you look at some of the metrics which is nowhere talked about by most duplicate payment, we are very comfortable that, okay, duplicate payment, even if it is made to vendor, it will get recovered. Vendor is a long-standing vendor, 10 years more. But then think about that money out of your system for that much period of time. And that's where you are paying cost of capital on the working capital at a very high interest cost, rather than, first of all, avoiding that work duplicate payment itself. Avoiding overpayment itself, making a right payment, capitalizing on your early payment discount from both sides. Either you have to pay when you are receiving money inside the system from your customers, or to the suppliers, you have to, when you are taking money into a system, give them early payment discount. And that is where the real-time funding which is available, where we are utilizing all the technologies which is available today, whether it is artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, and entire finance transformation. And as Mr. Chaudhary rightly said, we more often than not, we talk about ERP. But how integrated is the ERP and gives you the signal, the decision makers. And really, Mr. Gupta, Atul Gupta talked about CFOs are no longer just an accounts machinery for the organization. They are business solution provider. They are equally responsible like a COO, CEO for business growth and the growth of the organization. How are you getting that insights and also suggestion from the system when technology is there and people are using it? People who are using it are benefiting it a lot. Where you are comparing on the real-time basis that what is the cost of funding today if I don't get paid from a customer and I don't really give an early payment discount, or if I don't give early payment discount to the supplier, then what is the cost of funding? What is my working capital overburden I'll be creating? Am I getting a real-time insights of taking cash in, paying out versus raising funds from the market? So these insights and these systems are there. AI, ML, robotics, process automation, your dashboarding, your drill down to the last level and taking the faster decision. Because anyone who is taking a decision, if Mr. Rohit has to take a decision, he will be taking decisions based on the inputs is there. Today, if you look at inputs are getting more often than not are from the Excel. Our best friend is Excel. We believe it or not. We do all the comparison calculation on the Excel, and then Mr. Rohit will run to his executive team to get a report and then have a early morning meeting and then say, okay, this is a decision for today. But why not these decisions automatically trigger? Systems give you a suggestion. Technology is there. We need to embrace those technologies to help us and get those decision or suggestions early in the morning when we get up. If we get it on the mobile, all technologies are mobile enabled. We get a decision versus following up for the payments or getting in the cash rather than raising a fund or paying to the suppliers. Because one of the most important things which I've found people are not relying upon is the supplier satisfaction angle. Because he is not only you are very much dependent upon suppliers also, because if he does not supply your raw material and good quality in time, and if he is not satisfied, then ultimately your end customer is also not very happy. So everything from P2P to O2C is linked together, tightly integrated, and R2R, record to report. Obviously, you missed about that, but record to report is an essential element of giving insight, and that can happen only by adoption of a technology transformation. I have yet to talk to people who are talking about a legacy of running the finance and accounting function as an age-old legacy system. They are talking about transformation. Everyone is talking about transformation. And many of my known CFOs are doing it through enabling and embracing the technology by the way of RPA, by the way of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and also even to the extent blockchain as well. So these, because all other panelists and have already spoken so much, so I won't take much of the time so that there is enough time for people to ask questions. But technology today is very, very important element, and we need to focus on the KPIs, change our KPIs. No longer boardroom should discuss about, yes, they should, but they should equally give importance to cash flow metrics and the KPIs being defined as the important part of a measurement. And also, as cash has changed his face, again, I'm using the same word of it, from king to God. And to keep the God happy, you have to really, Ganpati has gone, we did Ganpati Bappa Moria. Similarly, if cash is God, we need to KPI to make cash as the KPI to really incentivize and to enable a system. And that can happen once you make a KPI. I'm sure all the finance leaders will make sure that there's KPIs once they are there, they're monitored and measured, which are then fed by automation, automatic insights, as well as machine artificial integration of a system. Because we all know, as Mr. Chaudhary was talking about, Rohit was talking about disparate system feeding in information, getting consolidating in Excel. Use technology, and it is possible either on the real time, and if your decision can wait even on the batch mode, if you are okay with 24 hours earlier data, to have those system integrated so there is a single source of truth, which will enable all of us, because this situation, when we were doing discussion in the morning also with some of my colleagues, when do you think, Naveen, things are going to open? Do any one of us have the answer? If we look at Mumbai alone, cases, yes, 2 weeks back it went down 1,000 cases a day, but again yesterday it was 1,500 cases. Although number of active cases are decreasing, but are we really ready to go back to the normal business as normal as usual earlier? No. Answer is no. And do we know the answer when it is going to end? Answer is again no. And once we adopt and taste the success of these efficiencies, this technology enabling cash and making really cash a real god, then we will see, we don't want to give over it also. So once you invest an effort into it, you will really, once you have tasted the success to it, you would like to enjoy it going forward. So that's it. I would like to just conclude. Yes, cash is God, and technology can help you really pray your God as well as God remains in your own house for a longer time with a lesser effort. I will pass it on to Mr. Charan Singh for taking this further. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen ji.
First of all, let me congratulate SHM to initiate a talk like this, and at this important time when we are all in the COVID period and we are thinking of the post-COVID situation. So SHM needs to be congratulated for that. I'm really impressed with the discussion that we have had so far. I've been a commercial banker and a central banker, and as an economist, I'll be sharing some thoughts with you. It's already been appreciated and recognized that digitalization and fintech is very, very important, and this is going to go forward. So there's no doubt about it that we all need to concentrate on this and see how to take it forward. There are certain things which I would like to flag, which we need to be cautious and which I think we as policymakers need to think about. Now, yes, digital finance is increasing financial inclusion, even where traditional financial inclusion is declining. So digital finance is going to play a very important role. In almost all countries, digital financial inclusion has improved tremendously, especially in Asia and Africa. So we are part of the global trend where it is taking place. The other issue is we have to be aware that what are these fintech companies doing? What is the role of the regulatory bodies? How is the central bank going to take it? How are the commercial banks prepared for it? And I'm going to come and touch on these points a little time from now. But at this point, I just want to flag some issues. The concerns that digital finance will impact the MSMEs, the microfinance institutions, the self-help groups, that segment of the society, and how fintech is going to take shape and how fintech regulation has to happen, these have to be thought through. Worldwide, one thing has been noticed, and we may not be able to follow it seriously, but this has been noticed that digital financial inclusion is associated with a higher GDP growth. Now, of course, we are not that rich a country. Per capita income is pretty low, and fintech does play a role in this because fintech means lots of reduction of cost for most of the companies which adopt it. So we will have to ensure, despite that we are not a very rich country, we will have to ensure that we come out with means, we come out with technology, and we come out with fintech products which our firms can afford and apply them. Another issue which is of great concern, which we need to think through, is fintech is contributing towards closing gender gaps in financial inclusion in most countries. But there is a concern that it may also increase in the post-COVID period. Now, in a country like India, that means financial literacy will have to be increased, and our women will have also to be trained to handle fintech products, because some of the layers of financial inclusion, especially MFIs and self-help groups, are run by women. And that is where we will have to focus on and think about it. We'll have to think about safety, and we'll have to think about disparity in access to resources. Then the other issue is we will have to think, and this is important now, the delivery of digital financial services is evolving, as you know it, with various modes of interaction between incumbents and disruptors. So we will have to think the fintech companies, which are frequently the source of all the innovation, often compete with banks and other established financial institutions. These established institutions are responding to the competition by investing heavily in fintech also. But we have seen um, widespread collaboration between fintech firms and established institutions based on complementarities. So we will have to think, how are we going to look at this new shift which is taking place between the fintech companies, the existing institutions, and how does the whole thing evolve, and in what direction is it evolving? So the fintech consolidation of the fintech industry may also be important for us. And if we have to look at cost efficiency, that will, going forward, we will have to think about it. Then the safe development of digital financial inclusion rests on a combination of factors, important factors. Now, what are these factors? The most important one, according to me, is regulation. Otherwise, it leads to financial instability, and once trust is lost, then you know for a long time it takes to recover that trust. So we have to think in terms of the regulation. We have to think, and when we talk of regulation, what do we need to think about? We have to think of consumer protection, identification, financial and digital literacy. So it's just not conducting a transaction. We should be able to come back and look and trace that transaction in case there are disputes that will be taking place. Now, this implies that we will need skilling of our labor, appropriate skilling, that the financial literacy and the financial inclusion and digital finance can find roots. So all I'm trying to say is that yes, on one hand, digital finance and fintech is very good, but then on the other hand, there are new risks to financial inclusion which we have to pay heed to. Now, in this context, as a policymaker, what should the central bank do and what should the commercial banks do? So first, let me take what should the central bank do. I think the central bank has to recognize that this is the trend, and they will have to expand the access to these products. So therefore, they will have to find out regulatory mechanisms for these products and these firms, and these have to be taken care in a country like India, where the country is very vast, multiple languages, different cultures, different terrains, different banks, different languages. This becomes a massive challenge. But the central, because we are working at a, when we talk of financial inclusion at that level, we are working at different segments of the society. So I think as the Reserve Bank has taken care of commercial banks, cooperative banks, non-banking finance companies, also when we talk of cooperative banks, state cooperative and urban cooperative banks, and rural cooperative banks. So complete plethora of institutions, the Reserve Bank will have to, and this is just an illustration, think in terms of how to expand the access to these fintech companies, and how to ensure that the products reach far and wide across the country as a central bank. Secondly, as was being just discussed, cash is God. So when cash is God, that means under fintech and financial inclusion, too much of time can't be lost in transaction and recovery of money. The trust can only be maintained if I do a transaction and I immediately see the money in my account, and I should be able to withdraw it whenever I require. So therefore, in terms of this financial inclusion and digital finance, speed will matter a lot. So when the Reserve Bank or the central bank comes into the play, it has to ensure that things happen. And please remember, when we are talking of digital finance, financial inclusion, and the fintech companies, we are still restricting ourselves to a certain size and threshold. But if we want to expand it across the country and reap the benefits of low cost with which fintech is associated, then the Reserve Bank has to jump in and show regulation, build trust. And in this exercise, the whole thing, whole purpose, the whole thing will only benefit if speed is ensured, so that we may not have cash, but we have something like near cash. Whenever we want to liquidate it, we are able to immediately liquidify and get cash in our hand. The central bank will also have to take care, because the vulnerable society will be associated with fintech and digital finance and financial inclusion at the lower segment of the society. And you are aware of what happened with MFIs in Andhra Pradesh. With the central bank have to take care of predatory.
Sir, I am in a webinar. Can I give you a call back?
So the predatory practices will also have to be studied, analyzed, and prepared so that the trust is not lost. The last one is, I'm thinking in terms of reducing cross-border costs. That has to be seen. Now, when in a country size of India, cross-border may not really mean international, but it may mean different geographical regions. And there are MFIs which have been operating in different states of the country. And those will have to be ensured then that how the money moves as rapidly as possible between different institutions, as well as if these institutions, the MFIs, have relationship with the rest of the world, and how does this move across the world. So the digitalization and microfinance will have to take care through this fintech products, will have to take care of various things and movement of money across the borders, across the states. Now, therefore, we have to then think in terms of developments in digital technology for financial inclusion. So we'll have to disaggregate the value chain, new players, including non-banks and non-mobile network operators, increasingly offer financial products and services directly to customers. So we have to integrate that. We have to be thinking in terms of platforms and application programming interfaces, new applications to be built on top of pre-existing products, thereby capitalizing on the product's existing customer base. And then we have to think in terms of alternative information, digitally collected data, including e-commerce and mobile transaction histories, which can then complement or substitute traditional methods of client identification and credit risk assessment. As I mentioned, one will have to ensure safety, and therefore credit risk assessment will be very, very important. Now, in places like India, which is very, very diverse at certain places, we will have to think in terms of customization, customer segmentation, human-centered products design, and then only we'll be able to ensure popularity of digital finance and fintech companies. So a lot of things have to be done. We have to think of data privacy, which will have to be ensured. Consumer protection has to be ensured. And are investors in peer-to-peer lending fully aware of the risks? Otherwise, later on, the central bank will have to be accountable for it. And then we have to also, what are the implications of these on profitability of banks? Because these would be competing directly with the banks, and the complete infrastructure on banking has already been laid out. So we have to think through all this. The last point which I want to make is on commercial banks. Are the commercial banks ready? Should they be used as a tool, or at least as a conduit, to ensure that digital finance and fintech companies reach nook and corner of the country? It is possible. Attempt is already being made. The commercial banks already have a very far-reaching access to different customers, especially after the Jan Dhan accounts. So I think The commercial banks will serve a great purpose if the government is able to bring in fintech products and ensure that the commercial banks get benefit out of it. Commercial banks see any value addition out of it, and then it is rolled out across the country. Including in this, I would like to say that role of NABARD and SIDBI should also be explored. Both of them, if are brought in along with the commercial banks, I think digital finance and application of fintech across the country will be very, very successful. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chairman sir. Can I now request Dr. Alok Pandeyji, Director IMS, to start the panel discussion with the panelists? We have Dr. Shri Rohit Bagade, Dr. Charan Singh, Shri S.C. Agarwal, Shri Akhil Chaudhary, and Shri Naveen Gupta, part of the panel. To you, Dr. Pandey.
Varun, thank you very much for organizing this wonderful webinar. It's great to listen to the initial opening comments of all the panelists, the industry view. Dr. Lavneesh Channa, Shri Ashutosh Chadha, Shri Akhil Chaudhary, Mr. Atul Kumar Gupta, Shri Rohit Bagade, Shri Naveen Gupta, and Dr. Charan Singh. Now, as I look at it, we are in the midst of a great crisis. You know, there's something called government response tracking, and there's a stringency index which has been created by Oxford University. And what it says that India's stringency on the lockdown in COVID was 96 in April, in around May, 75 on June 1, it's 79 still today on August 15. And that means that when you say cash is God and cash is king, we are seeing the God being demeaned. Why businesses are not functional? There's a huge trouble of, operating capacities are very limited. In fact, we've not allowed the country to function for quite some time. And amidst this, there's something called the liquidity crunch, which has happened. So much so that one of the questions which came on this, on the chat, I was saying that when PSUs and defense organizations do not pay even after 180 days, how do MSMEs maintain the cash flow? Dr. Lavneesh Channa talked about the cost reduction. Shri Ashutosh Chadha talked about rebuilding supply chains. Shri Akhil Chaudhary talked about technology being implemented. Mr. Atul Gupta talked about the steps taken by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in terms of providing support and say, remember, let me tell you, I was keen that he be here because there's a lot of gap in India in terms of accounting education and accounting practice. In fact, everywhere, if you look at it, the impact of fintech, we are talking fintech, but most of the institutions, whether they're engineering colleges, whether they're business schools, the fintech education is way behind where the practice is. For the first time in history, I work very closely with Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, where I'm an independent director on a 1,000 crore firm, which talks about 350,000 entrepreneurs. And I see that for the first time, the government is being seen faster than the educational institutions and even some of the corporates in terms of these areas. And I work very closely, of course, with some of the people in the ministry where I realize that fintech has a bright future. But yes, as I said, this is a difficult time, the COVID time. Cash is neither king. Cash is so, scarce in variety. They say, you only feel the need for oxygen when it is not there. You know, oxygen and love, we only, need it when we don't get any. And cash, the new oxygen, is not available. So much so that the government is unable to give GST compensation to the states. So in these times, this wonderful discussion has given some ideas to people, listeners. And I feel that we need to have a little focused approach on some of the questions. In fact, the fact is that when you talk about something like timing, liquidity, efficiency, risk management, and compliance, and as Charan Singh said, I hope I'm not I'm audible. Pardon?
Audible.
So as Dr. Charan Singh said, that there's something called regulatory interface, a lot of digitalization and fintech, and in fact, it has helped reach, banking and capital markets reach to a far audience. So, be careful as to where we are going. In fact, the background paper circulated by the ASSOCHAM talked about, a large canvas, cash flow prediction, managing internal, external funding, managing profitability, managing compliances, safeguard against fraud, cybersecurity, real-time cash flow visibility, and so on. So what I sincerely believe that as we go forward in today's discussion, we would actually look into these issues a little pointedly. I'll start with Dr. Charan Singh, the chairman, Punjab and Sindh Bank, former professor at IIM Bangalore and a long-time central banker. Sir, you've been very clear when you said that fintech, the way it is being implemented, has led to fair amount of increase in banking in something called financial inclusion. And as I get around, despite the Jan Dhan schemes and all, we still are around. They say 80% inclusion, but around 53% of the accounts in banks are actually functional. There's a lot of stress on the banking system. If you look at it, the NPA levels, but for the Supreme Court's verdict yesterday, where the 6-month moratorium on the interest rate payments has been removed, kind of, and the banks have started, getting their interest back, and there was a question on interest on interest. We have a huge NPA problem, which may compound if the economy does not start immediately. Under these circumstances, do you think the banks have enough money to invest in fintech? Are we going towards a structure where bigger technology spend is possible?
I would like to firstly say that on September 18th, we have Dr. Ratna Sahai from the International Monetary Fund, Washington, D.C., speak to us on fintech and financial inclusion. ASSOCHAM will be circulating that, and she has done a cross-country study, and on the basis of the cross-country study, they have a paper which will be discussed. And I'm sure ASSOCHAM will circulate to everybody, and you will get a chance to see it. If you have time, please come and attend the lecture by Dr. Ratna Sai. She is an international expert. You'll see from her presentation. The immediate question that you have asked is on the banks having enough resources to invest in fintech products and the rising NPAs. Now on NPAs, as you know, the situation is very grim. Banks only reflect what is across in the country. Banks are not away, are not isolated, and not separate from the country. If in the country there's a lockdown, and if there's no production taking place or less production taking place, and if there's stress in the corporate or in the MSME sector, it is obviously going to reflect on the balance sheet of the commercial banks as well as their profit and loss. Obviously, when there's a lockdown, the NPAs are bound to increase. They will increase because 6 months of lockdown means many things will not come back to normal in immediate period. Many things will change. Many industries may move on to new ventures and new things, and therefore NPAs are expected to increase. That is one thing that is already anticipated. It's once in a century sort of a situation. Nobody knows how to handle this situation. Nobody, per se, can predict as to what will happen when the lockdown opens, because there's a bakery and he could not open his bakery. Is it necessary that when the lockdown is unfolded, he will come back to his bakery? I'm not sure. Some people who are in the MSMEs with solid real estate probably will come back to the same work they were doing, but others may find it different and may move on. Similarly, there's been some positive things. You look at the pharmaceuticals, they're doing very well, but in tourism, travel, hotel industry, we do not know what shape and how are they going to shape up when post-COVID happens. Now, therefore, NPAs, the trend of NPAs, the trajectory is really very uncertain, and nobody will hazard a guess, including in India and foreign countries. The second issue that you flagged, in such uncertain times and challenging times, would banks really like to invest in fintech? I would say yes, they would like to invest in fintech. Why? Because it seems a great business opportunity. You must have noticed under Jan Dhan, when the Prime Minister announced that he's doing Jan Dhan, 36 crore accounts were opened. Initially, everybody used to say, oh, these accounts are good for nothing. No money will come in. We have just invested. We do not know whether there will be enough money which the banks will be able to recover. Over a period of time, we found that many of these Jan-Dhan accounts started getting money. When the direct benefit transfer would take place, these Jan-Dhan accounts would have money. The banks benefited by those balances. So sometimes there's an investment for a year or two, there's a gestation period involved, and once that is over, it starts showing up. Fintech is a very promising thing. If we are able to use fintech, and given what I have said, that safety walls are there, regulatory bodies are there, we need not have 70,000 fintech companies operating. We could have main 10 companies operating in India on which we are solid. The central bank is regulating them. The confidence builds up and this can spread across the country. This will be more like an investment which will start showing results, also beneficial for both the bank and the people. And when I said engage NABARD and SIDBI, what I meant is you just build trust and you expand the base. So the cost comes down, worth it. Thank you. Can't hear.
Pandey, you're on mute.
Is it?
Yes, no. Yes.
Yeah, sir, another question, related question to this is that banks in India still are in a very, very traditional mode. We still are talking about, banking, where we talk about opening bank accounts, where we talk about, of course, we are a developing country and these are things. But of course, there are new age banks like HDFC Bank. There are new age banks, several of the private sector banks who've done a great amount of technology infusion. And globally, you see banks actually becoming a digital knowledge service business, and how far you see the future, how far do you see Indian banks have to go? Today, when someone opens a bank account, let me tell you, it gets connected with the government through, you've got a PAN number given and an Aadhaar number given. You need to open a demat account. The demat account gets connected with it. In fact, India is very low in terms of financial inclusion. If you talk in terms of capital markets, very few demat accounts, though we have around 8 crore mutual fund folios. But we have very few demat accounts in India. That shows the market is very shallow. And one of the reasons is that, our banks are unable to teach or convert their customers and their savings into investments, and this is where banks actually lack. So when do you see Indian banks transforming into digital knowledge service businesses, rather than just being a place where people park some money in fixed deposits or savings bank accounts? How soon do we see it, sir?
Look, first and foremost, I've written a lot on public sector banks because they really account for about 75 to 80% of banking business in the country. Let me tell you, whenever there is crisis, it's the public sector banks which have the trust and people go and place their money in it. And amongst the public sector banks, it is the State Bank of India which enjoys the maximum trust. Despite that, there are other nationalized banks too. What does it convey? It conveys the bank provides you the services that you demand of the bank. Bank is not separate from the society. If the society wants the bank to serve as deposit hubs, the banks will provide you deposit hubs. If the society wants the banks to be serving as locker rooms, they will provide you locker rooms. If the society expects the bank to provide them digital advice, they will provide you digital advice. So the banks move along with the society. The few names that you took of the banks, these are the private sector banks. And please remember, the trust that public sector banks has much more. Fortunately or unfortunately, the fact is the trust which the public sector banks are having is much more. And that is where you would have noticed even in COVID times, all the deposits have come, right? So the question that you are asking, when will these commercial banks, mainly quote unquote public sector banks, change? They will change as the society's requirements change. Many times, given the size of the banks and the expertise available there, they can guide the society in some direction. And let me now tell you, if you look at the technological innovations and revolution in banking, who has led it in our country? State Bank of India. The handheld devices, the term was being experimented by State Bank of India as early as 2004 and 5, before the handheld devices really became popular. So State Bank of India's core banking, State Bank was leading in it. ATMs, State Bank of India was leading in it. If you look at one point, the private sector banks were talking about ATMs, but State Bank of India, with its sister concerns, overtook the network of ATMs, and State Bank of India has the largest network of ATMs very soon. So the point I'm trying to make is technological frontier approach has been much more in public sector banks than in any other bank in our country. Even today, if you look, State Bank of India's Zono Cash scheme, very innovative. So yes, once the society is looking for technological advice and advice on digital finance and fintech, the public sector banks are already playing an important role, and they will be able to play a much bigger role as the society begins to look at it. When and where do I see it? I see a very big change. Well, historically, I did see how State Bank of India revolutionized the ATMs and the core banking. Then comes the 2014, when we did our Prime Minister's Jan Dhan Yojana, opened accounts. After demonetization, there was a spurt in digital transactions. And now, I think post-COVID, again, you will see a spurt in digital transactions. Once this happens, then requirement, recognition, availability of fintech products will start, and then almost every bank will jump onto it and start providing fintech, digital finance in a bigger way. So I would expect, if I have to give a time frame, between next 5 and 10 years, you will see a digital revolution in our country.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Taking, one good thing is that, we've got during this lockdown, the data suggests that around 6 lakh crores worth of deposits were there as compared to last year, when in the same period 1,76,000 crore worth of deposits were there with the banks. The good part is that the public sector bank is still strong, and a lot of steps are being taken by the government in terms of, recently some of the banks have been amalgamated. And we are now talking about big banks, which is in terms of a global kind of a system we are adopting. And I hope that in coming period, the banks would convert themselves into digitally capable businesses, and they'll provide all that what a particular customer of a bank requires. And that includes some amount of financial education. In fact, a good part has been that banks also have insurance companies, and insurance products have been sold by banks in India, as part of the subsidiary. Now I'll come to Shri S.C. Agarwal, the chairman and managing director of SMC Global Securities, who is with us here, who is one of the stars in the trading business. Sir has been in this, in this particular business for a long time now, and he has seen the ups and downs of the economy. He has seen the Bombay Stock Exchange losing 90% of its business to a fintech controlled national stock exchange. If you remember, Mr. Ravi Narayan was with IDBI Bank. He was sent to Sweden. He picked up a model of Option One exchange and came back and set up India's first public sector stock exchange, National Stock Exchange of India Limited. And sir, from that point of time, it's almost like 27 years. I was in my MBA that year when National Stock Exchange was formed. And in fact, probably we got SEBI in 1992, of course. SEBI in India came in 1992 when Securities and Exchange Commission was created in US in 1934, 34. So almost 60 years late. But sir, last 27 years have been great for the stock markets, where now our market caps are almost like equal to GDP. But still, there are huge issues. As I said with Dr. Singh also, that we do have 8 crore mutual fund folios, but we still have very low participation in the capital markets of the common people. But now with technology coming in, we saw that during COVID times, there was a data which was flashed in press that a large number of young people are flocking into the market. These are tech-savvy young individuals. Today, let me tell you, I am an educator. All my students are at their hometowns and they're studying on computers. Young children are using mobile phones than ever before. It's a black swan event, once a 100-year event. It's not going to just change us as an individual, but also as a consumer, also as a saver, and also as an investor. So with this technology savvy generation moving forward, how do you see companies and trading businesses changing? How do you see the role of fintech, blockchains, distributed ledger systems? How do you see them coming to India? And how do you see these innovations providing more value to the underserved clients?
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Dr. Pandey, you have told the entire story, how NSE has started, how this technology plays a bigger role. And as you know, before 95, Bombay Stock Exchange was the leader and they were commanding great volume in the market. But after coming to NSE, and they have started technology, computerized system of doing the transaction. So from outright system to computer-based transactions, and it has changed the entire system of the Scottish market. And you see, earlier in outright system, people assemble in a ring and do the trade after crying. And though a person, a broker who is having a greater voice, he will be able to do the transaction early. And a person like maybe a big broker, but if he doesn't shout, he cannot shout, he remain behind in doing the transaction. So that was the happening, that was the system. Now it is a white collar job, and people are doing the transaction sitting at home, sitting at any place throughout the world. So technology has changed the entire scene of trading. And as you rightly said, 8 crore mutual fund folios are there. But if you talk about in exchanges trading, it is around 2.5 crore, 3 crore. So it is much less. So, but if you see this COVID time, I think around 40 lakhs new accounts has opened in 4-5 months. That was a great figure because young students and even young millennial, you can say, they are opening their account through KYC, through this mechanism, online system. And there are fintech and blockchain has played a bigger role. And you see, if you see the blockchain role in share market, Nasdaq had started very early in 2018 and for private securities transactions. So Nasdaq link. So it was very successful. So New York Stock Exchange is also exploring to start blockchain, using of blockchain. And in the same way, SEBI has also constituted a committee to explore how we can use the blockchain technology. And blockchain technology initially used, as you know, in this cryptocurrency. So it was very successful there, and people, even China has adopted it. Australian Stock Exchange has adopted in part. So many stock exchanges and regulators are adopting because it is on the decentralization of data, on the basis of transparency, because their system distributed ledger is keeping all transactions record fully. So it is always stored, transparent, and this technology is used. You can avoid various intermediary, like as on today, if a client has introduced, if you want to do the trade, he will contact his sub-broker in turn will contact broker, exchange, then regulators, and so on. So various intermediaries are there. But this blockchain technology, it will reduce all intermediary costs. So it will be lower cost, fast processing, and it is very good in interoperability. As on today, interoperability is there. So it will reduce processing time and faster, reducing cost, transparent. So blockchain technology is definitely very good. And as you said, fintech role in NBFC banks, they are now being the partner. Their fintech role, as Dr. Charan Singh has also said, fintech has played role in investor, small investor who cannot take loan, bank that don't have time to process their application. Through fintech, it is possible. Yeah, so it is in total inclusive. So role of fintech and blockchain technology, SEBI is very much exploring, and I think it's a future technology, and it will revolutionize the stock market. It will revolutionize the securities, and all fraud which has happened. It will, I think, that frauds because of non-verification of certain records, non-verification in the absence of monitoring. Blockchain is having the facility to stop the transaction, to report any illegal transaction is happening, and they will point it out. So blockchain technology is having a lot of plus points. So I think it's a future technology.
Sir, sir, the idea is great that you just now said that SEBI is very supportive of use of technology. But we've been seeing like recent order on margins, the problem with National Stock Exchange, where you had the co-location issue in 2013-14. In fact, technology is yet to reach the heartland, as Dr. Charan Singh had mentioned that it is the public sector banks which are the lifeblood of the country. Around 70% of business is done by. In the same vein, all the securities business still is centralized, and what you can say, it's concentrated at Mumbai. Probably we are seeing some good news that they will create some other center in Gujarat, GIFT city we are talking about. So with fintech, there is another thing called RegTech, regulatory technology. How do you see this regulation in India? Does it support innovation, technology innovation? What are your views? What have you seen over a period of time? And if it does not, what do we need to do about it?
Yeah, you see, Indian market is the one of the best exchange in the world, and even SEBI, they are regulating well. What we have done, still in world, omnibus system is there, but in SEBI and in exchanges, we are monitoring the transaction from client level itself, even individual client, whether he's a very small client, still unique client code is there. When every transaction is being reported to the exchanges by the intermediaries, and all controls are there, all margins on buy and sells are separately charged, and it is not being clubbed by on the broker level. So they are all playing all these things by technology. It is possible because of technology. We have T+2 settlement in cash system and T+1 in F&O. So we are much advanced with other countries, and everything is computerized, automated, and India is supporting automation. That is why SEBI has constitute the committee to implement blockchain, and they are seeing towards the world wherever blockchain is being implemented, what are the pros and cons. Even in China, blockchain they have adopted, but certain problems it has been seen they have regained. These are negative points, like legal and regulatory challenges are there. So it has to be worked out. while adopting blockchain, because everything is transparent, every all report is being generated at decentralized level. It is so all ledger system is there. So and that is why these pros and cons is there. Innovation is good, but you have to implement innovation after monitoring, after scrutinizing each and every aspects. So that is the I think regulators are doing. And new margin system which has been implemented from 1st September. Here, what SEBI has done, and if you earlier what was there, if you have a stocks in your DP and you have given power to only to the broker, power to only, and on the basis of that power to only, broker can give you the entire limit on that basis. But some foul play were happening, so exchanges and SEBI regulator has decided that you place the shares and then you take the limits, margin limits. So that has been implemented. And I think some hitches is some teething problems are there, because it's, 2 days back it has been implemented. So 15 days it will take for clearing all those teething problems, and I think it will be okay. And I am very optimistic that blockchain will play a definite role in this our security market. Even regulator will adopt it, and blockchain is having a lot of advantages.
Right. Thank you, sir. I think you sound very optimistic. And in fact, I can tell you 2-3 years ago when SEBI and RBI both won the best regulator award among the, our regulators are seen as one of the best in the world. It is a good sign. In fact, this is what has sustained us as a nation. Our regulators in terms of financial sector regulators, all of them have been great. In fact, with PFRDA coming in and what the new pension system coming in, we see a lot of action on account of moving savings into investment. Now I'll talk to I'll move to Mr. Naveen Gupta, who had earlier in his opening remarks spoken about how we can implement some of these technologies and how these technologies actually work. I'll take you to one of the important ideas. There's something called expense automation service. As far as I don't think Mr. Rohit Bogade is here, but the fact is that what I feel is that when you talk about cash management, it needs to be convenient, it needs to be reliable, and of course it has to help the strategic priority of the firms. You said that if there is if for example in cash management we say you may have a lot of cash, but if your debt levels are very high, you're gone. Right? And you may have a lot of revenue. If it is not in terms of cash available with you, then also you are gone. Now, in this, there are a lot of new things which have come in. And one of the things which has come in is I would rather want you to focus on some of the tools which are available, especially with focus on expense automation services during these difficult times when the economy comes to a standstill, when the systems don't function and you do not allow operation of any kind, any operating activity going around in the economy. So I would like to know from you, and for the benefit of the audience, what are the technology tools which are available during these times for cash management? Like your company has it, Datamatics. I saw its website yesterday, and one of the major player in this sector. So you can give us an idea the cash delivery systems, about the cash delivery systems, the right technology tools, and expense automation systems also.
So Dr. Pandey, in expense automation, there are two kinds of expenses. One is to the flow for the production which you are doing, or indirect procurement also, which you are procuring for housekeeping or your stationery or for the office and the office. And one is the internal expense in the payment to your employees and the expense your person. So to outside supplier, to a larger extent, quite a lot of expense automation has happened where the integration, starting from your invoice data ingestion using RPA, where data is captured automatically, indexed, so workflow it is gone through, it is being sent through automatic approval process, and then finally posting into the ERP. So to large, quite a lot of it is automated. And when I'm talking to various partners of ours, we see all of them has imbibed on this journey, and a lot of them has already adopted the outside to the external party expense automation. To even internal also, if we see employees, there are many problems and the issues which happen with the employee not submitting at the bill on the time, or they're not getting paid in the time because it's a manual verification process. And particularly in the COVID, no one is there in the office, and sort of is the last priority on focusing on the employer expense reimbursement. There also we see a lot of tools and technology coming to the play where you can just click the picture of the bill from your mobile, and then it is ICR automatically data captured, cost code, your GL cost code, and category, and the category of expenses automatically captured. And you press a submit button, and the complete workflow is submitted to your manager, which is going for the approval. And you've already clicked the picture, so even receipt is also there. Automation I have seen for the globe as well as particularly in India. It is taking lots and lots of precedence now, where people are either they have already adopted quite a large percentage in the manufacturing sector, particularly have already adopted, and people who have not. And during COVID time, interestingly, during COVID time, we have received 4-5 big inquiries from large, I would say, business houses of automating their expense automation. Dr. Pandey, am I audible?
Yeah. Please. Now, I think, what...
So on the expense...
Was, there are companies like just here a bit. MasterCard and other companies, Visa, MasterCard, they provide such solutions. In fact, one of the questions which always comes to my mind, I wish to ask that to Dr. Charan Singh and Sri Subhash Agarwal also. India actually, we have all these systems, they compete with each other. India is a country which works in silos. The problem of this country is the government, the industry, the academicians, everyone, works in a silos. Right? It's very rare that, I got a chance to become an independent director somewhere. I also work very closely with Multi-Commodity Exchange. I am on their index committee. And, kind of activities where some people were active. I'm working, say, with Varun on ASSOCHAM, and I said, well, it'll be a wonderful idea. When do we see technology companies like MasterCard, those into financial payment systems, collaborating with the Indian corporates rather than competing with them, and especially with this expense automation systems? What is your view on that?
So basically, yeah, sorry.
Mr. Naveen Gupta. First, Mr. Naveen Gupta, and then Dr. Charan Singh.
So Dr. Pandey, if you see even our solutions, and not only Datamatics, other solutions also are tightly integrated with all these MasterCards and the Visas of this world, including your travel portals also. So today, earlier when they started the journey of expense reimbursement, they started putting the system, but now their system is becoming too out of the pocket. And that's where they are collaborating with people like us and the other players also, where it is tightly integrated, even for, they have given a corporate card, which is, let's say I'm using a MasterCard corporate card, are directly integrated with the expense management system and the reimbursement system. So they have started collaborating a lot.
Okay. Sir, Dr. Charan Singh, I'll just come back to you on this. Like Google Pay, WhatsApp Pay, almost every technology company with Facebook purchasing a share in Jio, we see a changing landscape of financial services business, especially as far as the payment systems go. I'll come back to Mr. Akhil Chaudhary on the cash management systems in a while, but I'll come back to you on this. Why do we see so much of competition with global technology firms, especially from the bank side? When are we going to see Google Pay kind of systems being integrated with banks? Already UPI is there, but global technology firms collaborating with our banks.
I look forward to this development, honestly speaking. And I think over a period of time, this is bound to happen. I'm not sure, and I'm not very precise here, but I'm aware that in Silicon Valley before COVID, there was some relationships taking place and developing between the corporate world and the fintech companies and the banks. And that would have taken the e-commerce to a different level. So I think this is in offing, and very soon, as I told you, it will take about 5 to 10 years when you will find the marketplace becomes very different. And this will take time. It is an offering, but yes, right now we are not.
I'll come back to, before I go to Mr. Akhil Chaudhary, Datamatics as a company has a large number of products. I was pretty impressed seeing both Mr. Chaudhary's website, Veco Binary and Datamatics. And when it comes to these important solutions, which are very, very close to the heart of functioning an organization, various companies like Mr. Gupta, Atul Kumar Gupta, President, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, said that they are going to provide services to MSMEs and large number of companies. When you look at your solutions of cash management, especially from Datamatics side, which industries and which segments do you think are more probable users of such services, which are pretty advanced? They require investment in infrastructure. They probably require a payment to the service provider. How does it work? Which industries and which segments? Are MSMEs a client for this?
So, Dr. Pandey, you are right. MSME is certainly a client for it. But if I look at our industry segmentation, although we are finding quite a lot of attraction from services sector, banks, insurance, as well as manufacturing, but more so from manufacturing, if I have to compare with the relative terms, manufacturing is actually focusing quite a lot on the cash management and the automation, tools and technology, and transforming the CFO back office operations.
I'll come to Mr. Akhil Chaudhary on this. Sir, I think two questions. Two related questions. One, the same question which I asked Mr. Naveen Gupta. What kind of industry segments are probably going to be the users of such cash management systems, the investment side of it and all? Second, the cyber security part of it. What are the security concerns related to this? If, for example, say members of ASSOCHAM who are listening to this debate, and they are not too sure that if we implement such a system, of course, cyber security is something which is the Achilles heel of India's system. You have huge problems. We still do not have that cyber law. And let me tell you, I told people at the Ministry of Electronics, Information Technology in a meeting one day that during 2016, we just had around 2,000 complaints of cyber frauds. In 2018-19, there were 160,000 FIRs lodged in this country on complaints related to payments or fraud in the systems. So first question, the Veco binary system and your products in cash management systems, what are the products? How do they really work? Which are the right industry systems? And what you feel? How secure are we when we transact on such systems? Mr. Chaudhary, Akhil Chaudhary. Sir, unmute yourself, please.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Like, as you rightly said, Dr. Pandey, that it is Achilles heel for India, but not just for India. I think globally it's a menace. See, but what has happened is over the last couple of centuries, what used to happen as robbery, dacoity, lot of the figures of which are documented and undocumented both. But now it has grown to an area where it is getting more and more documented, or the data is getting captured. And I think if we look at it, 2014, the global cost of cybercrime was about 500 billion estimated, which grew to about 600 billion in 17, and it's expected to be closer to about $1 trillion each year. Now that's crazy if we look at the global dimensions, and we have had some unique cases. I think. Probably one of the central bank heist in Bangladesh in 2016, where cyber criminals, it was $101 million in a single heist, cybercrime heist. So the challenge is definitely large. But at the same time, what we need to look at is even in those pre-automated systems, there was a lot of leakage, a lot of revenue leakages, a lot of frauds that were happening. A lot of various ways in which whether revenues or expenses or other modes, the money was being channeled. But at the same time, since we are moving the digital way, what our endeavor has to be, how do we manage it far more effectively? And obviously, when we talk of problems, in terms of problem, I think starting from the basics, the malware, I think which we are really all of us are familiar with. But on the organizational side of it, what we really need to do is our IT teams or departments, if we are already not into the cloud, the strong patching that we need to do, we need to take care of app or middleware vulnerabilities. The challenge here is the biggest risk. I would say I'm not sure of the numbers, but I remember reading an article which said about 40% plus cyber crimes have some kind of connection to somebody internal to your organization. That means there is some information which with or without an intention is passed on to some outsiders and which is taken advantage of and utilized by the hackers or cyber criminals. Now, obviously, the problem is compounded by the fact that we have a lot of mobile and bring your own device penetration in the marketplace. Companies are allowing BYODs. So one of the big kind of practices, or one of the best practices organizations can have over here is have a comprehensive mobile device management strategy and kind of even look at how do we manage effectively on the mobile devices that are brought in or used by people in the organization. Our own employees should not be using those non-compliant or jailbroken devices. People are very happy that I bought a jailbroken iPhone, latest version of iPhone, and I got it at half the price and so on. But then those create vulnerabilities for our organization and consequently for our customers too.
Okay.
And I think probably a subject. Yeah, I think I'll stop here. I can go on and on.
Right. I think we are close to 1 p.m. And what I feel is that cybersecurity as a particular area needs to be constantly being upgraded. Plus, we definitely need a wonderful new law. Of course, the government is debating on it. There are privacy issues, other issues. In fact, a lot of people are talking about it. But yes, cash management systems, as as we understand them, both the idea of increasing consumer expectations or what you call the cost of digital disruptions or regulatory changes, all of them basically combine when corporates are being offered as a solution, and probably your company would be looking into it, or the other Datamatics. So now I hand over to Mr. Varun Agarwal for the final comments by Sri Subhash Agarwal. Varun, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. Can I request Subhash Agarwal ji, Senior Managing Committee Member of ASSOCHAM and CMD of SMC Global Securities, to kindly present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Varun. First of all, I would like to congratulate ASSOCHAM and Varun and his team for conducting this program, Managing Cash Flows with Technology. I am privileged to present a vote of thanks on my behalf and on behalf of ASSOCHAM to Sri Dr. Lavnish Chanana, VP Government Relations and Chairman ASSOCHAM National Council on IT and E-Commerce. For his welcome address, he has started the topic and introduced what to speak, managing cash flows with technology. And so giving time, valuable time in this seminar, we would like to thank him. We would like to thank Sri Ashutosh Chadda ji, VP and Head Public Policy and Government Affairs, and Chairman, ASSOCHAM National Council of FinTech. He has delivered his industry address on supply chain and other managing cash flows and technology. We will also like to welcome Sri Akhil Chaudhary, CEO and Managing Partner, Vaco Binary Sematic. So he has also delivered his industry address. And we would also like to thank Sri A. Atul Gupta, President ICI. He is my friend also. So he has talked about SME and reforms and the studies conducted by Institute of Chartered Account of India. We would also like to welcome Sri Rohit Bagade, Chief Financial Officer, India Subcontinent SAP. Sir, you have delivered industry address and highlights various points. We would also like to thank Sri Naveen Gupta, Executive Vice President, BPM Datamatics, Dr. and also Dr. Charan Singh, CEO, eGrow Foundation and Chairman, ASSOCHAM National Council for Banking. He has talked about fintech, financial inclusion, managing cash flow with technology, and very good moderation by Dr. Alok Pandeyji, Director IMS. So in a very nice way, he has conducted this panel discussion. So we would like to thanks and for his good knowledge about all the subject he has talked about. So it's a wonderful program. I think audience has taken, definitely they have taken good things and nice talk. Today's program of managing cash flows with technology and role of blockchain and fintech and various technology. So I conclude, and of course, we are thankful to the watchers, audience who are seeing this program, and those who have supported this seminar. We all are thankful to them. And I conclude here saying my thank you again, once again. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chaudhary sir. Thank you very much. Great to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And Dr. Singh, sir, thank you very much. Great interacting with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I think nice meeting you all. Nice meeting you all. Thank you.
Chana sir, thank you.
Dr. Pandey, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Varun. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.